In my last video, I went over how to draw a rectangle using a compass and a ruler. In this video, I'm going to go over how to use a 1x4 triangle to lay out a scroll that will fit your grill. Here I have a 4 3/8 inch registration mark, which is the size of 1/4 of your grill drawing. So that rectangle represents the upper right quadrant of your drawing. And here I have a 2.5 inch by 10 inch rectangle. Last summer, I had an article in the ABANA Hammers Below about how to work out the math to fit a scroll into a given space. And in this case, I used those equations to determine that a 2.5 inch by 10 inch triangle was the correct size. So we set our compass to the 2.5 inches. Then we locate off of the corner of our drawing so that now we can do an arc from each of those first two marks. We can find our starting point of our scroll. And the way the method works is you set your compass to that original size, and that's the first 90 degrees, the first 90-degree arc of your scroll. And then the next 90-degree arc's radius is the length from the long leg of that triangle to the hypotenuse. So after I draw this arc, now I take a square and I draw a line to the hypotenuse. Then I'll set my compass to that distance, and that gives me the radius of my next arc. And you continue this method all the way down the triangle for each 90-degree section of your scroll. I find it important to draw lines along the midpoints of each of these arcs. This is helpful especially for later when we do the offsets. Now I'm setting my compass to the second 90-degree arc's radius. And it's important when you're doing this, if you want to be really precise, to try and set some marks so that you know exactly where your endpoints are for each of your arc lengths, or I should say scroll segments. This becomes important later on when the arc segments are in the space of the center of the rectangle. And here you'll see me make a mistake. I didn't cut this out so you can see how easy it is to mess up. As I grabbed the compass, I hit the wheel and I changed the radius of that arc. Similar errors can come if you allow your paper to slide, or you allow your compass to slide or move in some way. So here I've reset. I'm just making sure to line the compass up correctly so that I don't go over the barrier into the next quadrant. Now I'm going to draw in this segment. Now I'm going to go back to my original triangle. And draw this new segment radius. I find that doing drawings like this is really helpful, especially when you're forging these scrolls. If you think about forging each of them 90 degrees at a time, you can break up the forging and see which sections you need to adjust as you're forging the scrolls. Now I'm making some registration marks so that I can draw a straight line that is the end of this arc. In a later video, I'll go over the math that I laid out in that article for how to calculate the size of the triangle based on the rectangle you're using for your scroll area. And I'll also go over how to use the math in those equations to estimate stock length for your scrolls. It's important to take your time when you're doing this. Make sure you're getting everything lined up and that you're making marks that you can reference off of. That way you can get your arcs exactly 90 degrees. A lot of times in the shop, if I'm drawing one of these, I won't go to all the trouble to make everything exact. I'll just eyeball 90 degrees for each arc. But for this case, since I'm doing a drawing, I'd like it to be as close to ideal as possible. There I'd made a mistake. I'd either let the compass slip or change the radius, so I had to go back and make sure that I was actually 90 degrees. And the length of your lead does change as it wears down, so make sure that you're still on the right radius for whenever you start this next arc segment. As you can see, our scroll is starting to take shape. We only have a couple of more radii to go. Just find reference points along the outside edge of your drawing. Along the outside edge of that rectangle, and that'll help you make sure to get your arc segments at 90 degrees. Like I said, that'll come into play, especially in a few minutes when we start drawing in the offsets. Like I said, make sure you don't bump that wheel. Just a small change in the radius can really change the look of your scroll. Using those points, now I'm going to stop to draw in the end of this segment. I'm doing all these pencil lines very light. That way, when I'm done, I can just erase this. But I do find it very helpful to have those in place whenever I'm drawing. You'll see when I'm doing the offsets why I like those when I make a mistake later. This is our final segment. That is the outside edge of your scroll. Now to complete the drawing, we're just going to do an offset. And in the drawing, it's a 1/4 inch thick material, so I'm just using this ruler. And along that original line that I drew, I'm measuring 1/4 inch in. I'm just going to take my compass, set it to the original pivot point, and then set the compass to that offset radius. And as I draw this arc 90 degrees up, I get an arc that's 1/4 inch offset from my original. Now I move to the second pivot point, and I can adjust my compass and just bring it around 90 degrees at a time. This is where I find it important to keep track of which pivot point you're using, because in this case I grabbed the wrong pivot point. As I bring this radius around, you can see the error. And since we have each of our radii on the triangle on the sheet of paper above us, if we need to adjust, we can just go back and count however many segments in we are, set our compass to that radius. We should pretty easily be able to find the correct pivot point. Then adjust our compass down to the starting point of our new segment and draw that in. Here I'm just erasing that mistake. And continuing to draw in each 90-degree segment. And since it's a slight taper, I'm not going with the same exact 1/4 inch the whole way around. Here I'm going to come into 3/16, and then on the next one I'll come in 1/8, and that'll give us a nice little taper to our square. Again, I'm using that original drawing just to make sure that I'm choosing the right pivot point. And setting to the new 3/16 offset. And we'll draw in the arc. Like I said, this last little bit, I'm going to do it as an 1/8 inch, and then I'll just hand draw in the ending point. And as you're drawing a grill, if you were drawing the standard ABANA grill, I'll set my compass to one radius, and then I'll just draw in that radius for all 4 quadrants at the same time. And just work my way down the triangle around each quadrant. And there you saw me just hand draw in that last little bit to give the end point of our scroll. And here, using the math from the article I referenced in the hammers below, I know that the new radius is going to be roughly 3.3 inches. So I set my compass to that length, and I'm marking the starting pivot point. When you look at the drawing, you see there is a segment of straight stock in the middle, and that transition point seems to line up with a diagonal from the top left corner of this rectangle down to the bottom right. So we just draw our arc length in here and end at that line, then offset our compass to the inside radius and then draw that in. Now I just take a black pen and I ink the lines going around the drawing. And that's the way you can set up and draw a nice looking scroll. It's the final scroll. And then you'll see that final scroll incorporated into a full drawing here.